Hello, and welcome to Own Your Retirement. This is Albert Lalonde from Kaizen Financial Group. If you'd like more information about what you hear during our show today, give us a call at 586-752-7008 or visit us online at www.kaizenfinancialgroup.com. That's Kaizen, Kaizen. And while at my webpage, make sure you click on the podcast page to check out our past shows and to subscribe to our program on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or Amazon Music. Okay. For most working people, debt is a normal part of their financial strategy, or I should say their lives, because of mortgage, auto loans, student loans, and even credit cards. However, with a thoughtful financial strategy and the discipline to stick to that strategy, you can simultaneously take on debt while still save for robustly for retirement. However, if debt begins to overwhelm your finances so thoroughly that every dollar you bring in as income almost immediately goes back out to pay debt, that might be a flashing red light telling you it is time to meet with your financial service professional to change your course once and for all. Now, if your retirement is coming soon, perhaps within the next few years, well, it's all the more important to dig out from under the debt. A burdensome amount of debt could mean you end up delaying your retirement for, let's say, another year or more. And it could also mean you have to give up some of the things you were looking forward to in retirement, like traveling and new activities. So, during the show today, we're going to analyze debt and the impact it has on your financial strategy and future retirement. But first, let me introduce my fantastic co host, Tony Shore, who brought in lunch today, which means all his debts are paid. Hey, Tony.
Thank you, Albert. Well, it's the least I could do. You've helped me and so many other people out over the years. I know you love to help people out with their finances and their planning and their
Yeah,
retirement planning. So that's fun. But I've had a great week. I've been down helping out my parents, and
nice.
yeah, so I've been down there the last few days with mom and dad. That was fun. Enjoying some weather. How about you? What have you been up to, Albert?
Yeah, I've been busy for the weekend as well. I mean, catching the Detroit Tigers over the weekend on a night
Nice.
game. Yeah, seen the grand slam home run. That was
You were there
beautiful.
for that, huh?
I was. It
That's
was
neat.
wonderful. In fact, the home run wasn't too far from my seat actually, so that was really nice
Wow,
looking.
that's really cool.
Yeah, and then obviously we had Mother's Day, and
Yeah.
though my mom has passed and love you, mom, but got to spend it with my girl and all her kids and that. So it
That's
was a
good.
lovely day, lovely day.
Good, good. Well, you know what? I mean, yep, the Tigers, hopefully they'll have a good season. If that game was any indication, that's pretty cool.
Hmm.
It sounds like you've got a good topic for us. I mean, you talk about retirement being the reward for a lifetime of hard work
Yeah.
and financial discipline. You don't want debt to derail that, right?
Definitely, definitely. In fact, a U.S. News and World Report article titled 16 Things to Do When You're Deep in Debt, it actually provides some insights and ideas that I think will be very useful to our conversation today, Tony. So let's begin with first defining what it means to be in significant debt. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York Center for Microeconomic Data, America's household debt rose to $17.5 trillion in the final quarter of 2023. That's an increase of $212 billion from quarter three. Digging deeper, well, American credit card balances rose to $1.13 trillion. That's a rise of $50 billion from quarter three. And then
Wow.
mortgage balances, that even jumped to $12.25 trillion, an increase of $112 billion from quarter three. And finally, auto loan balances increased to $1.61 trillion in quarter four, a jump of $12 million from quarter three.
Oh, that's a lot of bad news. Those are shocking statistics, but what do they mean for the average American?
Well, many financial services professionals recommend to clients that they avoid, well, allowing their debt to income ratio to rise higher than 30%. That means that if you make $100,000 a year, you should have a financial strategy in which no more than $30,000 of your income is used to pay off debt. But you should note that other financial services professionals recommend a debt to income ratio that doesn't go higher than 35%. And then, obviously, another common rule of thumb is that if you're using half your income to pay debt, it's time to adjust your financial strategy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You want to keep it down below 30%. I agree
Hmm.
with that. For a lot of people, I know a heavy debt load can mean stress, right?
Yes.
And especially if you're only a few years away from retirement. So I know you have the skills and experience to help you create financial strategies to attack that debt without jeopardizing other elements of the financial strategy for individuals, right?
Yes, for sure. It's very important to have that financial strategy.
Yeah.
Now, let's consider some moves that might help you reduce some of those debt in your strategies. First, you should take a full inventory of your entire debt picture. Don't cut any corners because, well, it's vital to get a thorough snapshot, I should say, of precisely how much you owe and who you owe that money to. This step is even more critical if you have a household with multiple spenders. And then
Yeah.
after you understand all the nuances of your debt, well, it might be wise to sit down with your spouse or other family members to discuss your monthly budget. A budget is useful because it lets you know precisely how much money is flowing into your bank account and how much is flowing right back out. Using this information, you can work with your financial services professional to identify clear ways to cut back on your spending so that you can use that savings to go after your debt load.
Right, and I've made the error of trying to do this in my head, Albert. You don't want to budget in your head. You want a
No.
formal, well-written budget or to use budget software and work with a financial professional,
Yeah.
so you can, deal with that debt load, as you say.
Well, when you write it down, I always believe you own it. You're,
Yeah,
you're accountable to it. So that's big. You have to write it down. And
good
if you,
rule.
yeah, and if you have considerable debt, bankruptcy, well, maybe something you want to address with your financial service professional. According to the federal judiciary, total bankruptcy filings rose nearly 17% from 2022 to 2023. Last year, a little more than 434,000 people and almost
Mm,
19,000 businesses filed for bankruptcy. And while the bankruptcy process temporarily harmed your credit, thereby making it more challenging to receive good offers from, let's say, credit card companies and lenders, it is a way to catch your breath for a minute and start over. But be aware that the bankruptcy process requires the services of a bankruptcy attorney.
Oh, of course, and I know that that's a you would only recommend that as a last resort.
Yes.
Work with a financial professional first to try to get back on track with
Hmm.
budgeting. Bankruptcy would be the absolute last resort. But what about credit counseling services?
Well, in some cases, credit counseling may be a solid option. For example, certain outstanding or counseling agencies, I should say, can negotiate a lower interest rate with your credit card companies. If you go this route, be sure to work with a nonprofit credit counseling agency that has an affiliation with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling or the Financial Counseling Association of America. Now, the U.S. Department of Justice also maintains a list of credit counseling agencies that have earned its approval. Combining the services of a credit counseling agency and a financial services professional could be a nice 1-2 punch for getting on top of your debt.
Yeah. Well, before we go on, Albert, if our listeners have questions or they want to get a financial plan in place, get a second opinion on their investments or their portfolio, their retirement income plan, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, listeners, you can visit my website at www.kaizenfinancialgroup.com. That's Kaizen. Or you can call my office at 586-752-7008 with any questions about paying off your debt, preparing for retirement, or any other parts of your financial strategy.
Yeah, that's huge. And this has been an insightful show so far, Albert. What do you have for us next?
Well, let's continue with the U.S. News and World Report article 16 Things to Do When You're Deep in Debt. It has some more details that I think are very important. And the first of which is determining what debt source you should pay off first. Now, if you're not able to entirely pay off your debt right away, you should consider prioritizing the debt sources that's currently your biggest financial roadblock. Now, targeting paying off things like, let's say, your home and vehicle first, and then follow that up with debts that can't be discharged, like student loans and unpaid taxes. After that, you can prioritize unsecured debts like credit cards.
Yeah. I mean, that seems like a good idea and a good strategy because you have to have a place to call home. Uh,
Hmm.
you need a decent vehicle, otherwise you can't get to work, which means no paycheck, and no
Yes.
paycheck means your debt situation gets worse. So you want to have that strategy in place.
Definitely, definitely. Now, let's talk about credit cards. You may benefit from reaching out to your credit card companies to review your accounts. Now, early in the show, I noted that using a credit counseling agency to negotiate reduced interest rates could be an option, but in some cases, you may be able to do that work yourself. Reviewing your entire credit card situation and then having an informed conversation with your credit card company, well, may be beneficial. In fact, in some cases, companies may provide temporary hardship programs that reduce your interest rates for a limited amount of time, which positions you to focus more on your monthly payment, basically on the principal balance. Now, one note of caution here. If you reach out to your credit card companies asking them for solutions because you're having difficulty paying what you owe, your credit limit may be reduced thereafter.
That's interesting because you don't want your to hurt your credit rating or and your credit limit. So, calling your credit card companies can help you find solutions then, but there is that potential downside. That's good to know about.
Yes. Well, another potential strategy step is also to pay off your highest interest rate debt first. Now, this step is sometimes referred to as the avalanche method, or going, let's say, as it's straightforward. For example, if you have four credit cards and each of them has considerable revolving debt, utilizing the avalanche method, you'd select three of your cards and pay the minimum on each of them every month. However, with the fourth card, which should be the one with the highest interest rate, your focus is on paying as much as you can every month with the goal of getting it down to zero as soon as possible. Now, just be cautious about paying so much on this card that it makes it more difficult to pay your monthly bills as well as essentials like groceries and gas. And when you've paid this card off, you can then take that pool of money and use it on the credit card with the next highest interest rate. After that, you just repeat that step until all four credit cards have been paid off.
Yeah, I've heard that called the snowball method or avalanche
Mhm.
method. And I think it's easy to fall into that trap where we rely too much on credit cards. We have car repairs or need a new appliance or,
Right.
a repair on the house or travel. There are plenty of costs that have us reaching for the plastic. But if you're working with somebody like yourself, and if you're budgeting, that helps you avoid being overly reliant on credit cards, doesn't it?
Definitely, definitely. And now, while the avalanche method will likely work for many of you listening today, there's also the possibility that the exact opposite strategy could be even better. Yeah, that's right. Paying off your smallest source of debt first could have some big benefits. Now, while some quick math may suggest that the avalanche method is the way to go, the reality is that it may take a long time before you begin seeing the benefits. Therefore, some financial services professional recommends first going after the credit card with the smallest balance while continuing to pay the minimum on all your other cards. Then, once you've paid off the credit card with the smallest balance, you move along to the card with the next smallest balance. For some, this method may work well because you can easily track the progress of that you're making, and it's a nice reward and incentive when you pay off something, especially if it's sooner than later.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, whatever way you choose to pay down your debt, the most important thing is to stick with it until
Yes.
you hit that goal, right?
Definitely. Now, let's highlight credit cards a bit more. Transferring a credit card balance is another option that may help you dig out from under your debt. If you watch even a bit of TV every day, you've no doubt seen credit card ads trying to hook you by offering 0% interest on balance transfers for an initial period, and it's generally 12 to 18 months. Now, if you act strategically, you may be able to use this offer to find, well, to your financial advantage, let's say. For example, you could transfer $10,000 to a credit card that doesn't charge interest during the initial period I just mentioned. Just be sure to pay off the balance before that 0% interest period ends. Now, but there are some possible drawbacks that you should bear in mind, like the fact that you typically only qualify for credit cards with zero interest on balance transfers if you have an excellent credit rating. Moreover, you should also note that there may be a balance transfer fee, which is frequently 3 to 5% of your balance. Finally, if you frequently make purchases on the card you transfer the balance from, you may just be further increasing your debt. And if you're considering transferring a credit card balance, well, I'd recommend discussing the pros and cons with your financial services professional.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And we've had an eye-opening dialogue so far about eliminating debt. What do you have for us next?
Well, there are more potentially useful tips from the U.S. News and World Report article, 16 things to do when you're deep in debt. So let's begin. The article suggests now that refinancing debt to pay it off is something you may also want to consider. And while it can, sometimes take a long time to get approved, it's possible that refinancing could potentially lower your monthly payments over the long term. Now, the cash you're able to put away with refinancing can then be earmarked to, well, paying off other debt like your mortgage, vehicle payments, and student loans. Yet, there are some factors that you should be keenly aware of. First, certain types of refinancing may have extra costs, and in other instances, refinancing a loan could extend its length, which could ultimately make it more expensive.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to go through that process, Albert, without working with somebody like yourself or a
Oh,
financial professional. That's for
for
sure.
sure, for
Yeah.
sure. And then remember, upping your payments is another way you may be able to pay down your debt a little bit faster. With this technique, you dedicate any money you don't need for bills and essentials like groceries and gas to paying off your largest debt source. And it's easy for any of us to be, let's say, lulled into a sense of routine by paying the same amount each month for our mortgage or car loan. Ditto student loans and credit cards. But here's a reminder, okay? There's nothing that says you should only make one payment a month. If you do find yourself with some extra money, why not use it to make an extra mortgage or auto loan payment? If you do so, you may end up paying off some of those loans even faster than you'd originally anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, using extra money to make those additional payments sounds like it's a lot less fun than using it for something like a vacation or something like
Right.
that. But I think it could definitely have a dramatic effect on your financial future and help you out.
For sure. And if you can get into retirement without debt, we already know how big that is,
Yeah,
right? And
huge.
then and then here's something that isn't exactly breaking news either. The best way to get out of debt, well, is to stop creating new debt. All right. Sure, that sounds like a good old fashioned common sense, but it's not always as simple as it sounds. It's easy to find yourself relying too much on credit cards when you need something or don't have enough cash to pay for it. But using cash as much as possible may make achieving your ideal retirement a little easier because it won't saddle you with excessive debt. Toss your credit cards in the junk drawer so they aren't sitting in your wallet, ready to be taken out whenever you're, well, in the mood to shop, let's say.
Yeah, take away the temptation. Of course,
Hmm.
it takes discipline, but it can be done. And even in our swipe it and tap it economy, Albert, cash can sometimes still be king. Then,
Oh, big time. In fact, you should also be working on an emergency fund if you don't already have one. Our regular listeners know that I've long advocated for emergency funds. Throughout my career, I've seen countless examples of just how important they can be. And no matter how thoroughly you're prepared, there's a realistic chance that you'll eventually be hit with a nasty financial surprise. Maybe it's a new windshield or replacing a TV that conked out the day before you're hosting 20 people for the big game, or a last minute plane ticket. There's a seemingly endless list of things that can, well, disrupt your finances. Surprise expenses can often leave many people reaching for their credit cards, which can then push them even further into debt. Yet, with an emergency fund, you may be able to cover some of those unexpected costs with cash. And when you fork over cash, you aren't paying interest, folks. And there aren't many better financial steps than that.
yeah, yeah, and I know that your advice to have an emergency fund with 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses is huge. And my wife and I have been working on building up our emergency fund. Again, it just takes some time and discipline to do that.
Exactly. And then remember, setting up an automatic savings account may be an additional way to get yourself out of debt sooner. If you don't have enough money in your bank account for holiday shopping or birthday presents, or even a new suit for that big presentation you have to give to your colleagues, you may once again turn to credit cards. Yeah. If you're truly committed to strategizing your way out of debt, saving as much money as you can is certainly a wise step. To that end, consider setting it up so that when your paycheck hits your checking account with direct deposit, a predetermined percentage, okay, of it ends up in your savings account. Within just a few months, you'll have an amount of money big enough to make a real difference when it comes to not relying too much on your credit cards.
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, you don't have to save $1 million. You just
Right.
have to save enough to produce a positive impact on your finances.
You are definitely right on that, Tony. And then remember, keeping up with your bills is another solid way to get yourself out of debt. Not paying your bills on time can lead to sizable late charges. And if you're late on several bills a month, late fees can add up very quickly. So paying your bills when they're due is a simple way to just stay away from debt.
Yeah. Well, Albert, great show. Some great advice today, but we're out of time. Let
Ah,
our listeners know, though, before we go, how they can get a hold of you.
yes, folks, if you have questions about getting out of debt, saving for retirement, or just your financial strategy, visit my website at www.kaizenfinancialgroup.com. That's Kaizen Kaizen. Or call the office at 586-752-7008 and discuss how my team might be able to answer your questions and address your concerns. Because remember, it's our goal to help you prepare for the retirement you work so hard for so you can own your retirement.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Albert. And listeners, that does it for today's episode of Own Your Retirement with our host, Albert Lalonde.
Take care, everybody.